Hi, I'm John Ballantyne, and welcome to another edition of On the Marquee. And I want to thank our sponsor for this edition, John Cox and We1's Pediatrics down in Canfield. Our guest today has been around the Playhouse for quite a while. She's done a lot of shows here. She's been on stage, she's been backstage, and you might be interested in finding out, and we will find that out, what her favorite thing to do here at the Playhouse is. And I welcome Lynn Kirkwood. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Jack. Thank you. And by the way, this is my 50th anniversary.
Wow. All right.
I started in 1968.
Wow. Well, congratulations on being here that long.
Well, off and on, but...
Off and on, yeah.
Yeah,
well,
but...
What was your first show here, and how did you get involved?
Okay, the first show was actually backstage on props. And it was a show called The Best Man, which was Gore Vidal's play based on the Nixon-Kennedy election. Mm-hmm. And it had a fabulous cast. People, well, Joe Scarvell's still around, Gene DiCaprio, John Abbey, God love his soul. First show for Downey Smith.
Oh, wow, okay.
And other people that I'm sure have been forgotten along the way. But it was a fabulous experience because these people were such pros. And I learned so much by watching them. I didn't have the courage at that point to go on the stage. That's what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But John Abbey was the one that finally forced me to at least get involved mm-hmm. and take it from there.
Well, John Abbey, I never had the chance to work with, but he was in so many things here. And he was such a powerful actor.
And the Temple.
Yeah. I mean, he was a major force in acting at that time. What was that experience like to work with him, not only in that show, but in future shows beyond that?
Well, I never actually worked on stage with him. I just worked with that, but I knew him for years because he worked for my father. Mm-hmm. And that's also the reason, because I was in high school and it was a different era back then. Mm-hmm. So my parents were very apprehensive about letting me in the terrible theater. And John said he'd take care of me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you started here, and you had been here through the glory days, what's termed the glory days of the Playhouse. What was a typical opening night like at that time?
It was phenomenal. Completely sold out houses every single time. Support from everybody who was everybody in town, plus all the, regular quote-unquote people. Everybody supported the Playhouse. Everybody, this was the place to be. Because, of course, right back then, there weren't any other Playhouse. The nearest one was TNT. Mm-hmm. There weren't all these other offshoots yet. And it was so professional. These people knew what they were doing. They didn't take it as, oh, this is kind of fun to do for a change. Mm-hmm. They were serious.
Well, I think that came partly from the directors they had here at the time, because they had people like, now this might be before you came, but Jim Camera, Arthur Sercom, all those people that came in from New York and laid, I think, a foundation of professionalism which lasted.
Yes, well, this was during Bentley Lenhoff's days. Mm-hmm. In fact, he's the one that did direct The Best Man. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, there are other people, obviously, Vera Friedman, Sis Soller, right. John and Rennie Griffith, Bob Tornello, Lucian Robards Jr. Was his stage name. Mm-hmm. They were all here when I started.
Well, you were in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes.
You played, I think, Candy Starr.
Yes.
And that show had phenomenal talent in it. I mean, it was like a who's who in Youngstown theater was in that show. What was that experience like?
I wouldn't say, actually, it was a who's who in the theater. It was of the younger generation, the upcoming generation, but the talent was absolute, but they still had the feel mm-hmm. of professionalism. They took it very seriously. Lynn Nelson Rafferty was in it. Dick Kepley, mm-hmm. who was a long time, Jackson Moody.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Jackson was great.
I'm sorry for those who don't know who these people are. It's very sad that, of course, they're long gone. But the odd thing about the Cuckoo's Nest, it was way before its time. We put it on in 1972 and cleaned up the language because you didn't say some of those words on stage in 1972. And the movie, which won an Academy Award, didn't come out till 75. So opening night, we had everybody all dressed up in formal attire type thing, I mean, for the theater. And fully a third of the audience left at intermission.
Wow.
Because of the content. They said they never, ever seen that before. Because it was so controversial and edgy for that time.
Well, yeah, it would have been for them, yeah. It was extremely successful.
Yes, Joe Scarvell directed. And Chris Brown played McMurphy, who has gone on to do things in New York. It was just phenomenal. It was, and it was a lot of fun.
That's the important part. But you've worked with some legendary people here, and you've named just a few of them. What are some of your favorite stories of either past productions or just general Playhouse stories?
I have nothing but fond memories along the way. Like, I don't know if I can pick out. Obviously, the first show backstage was exciting to work with these people. First on stage was exceptional. Then in the later years, when I did Christmas Carol as the Ghost of Christmas Past for 4 years in a row, it was a great challenge to just take my character and keep her character, but fine-tune it every year. It was a challenge, which I really liked doing, because there's always more facets to a character than the first time you play it.
Sure. Oh, yeah. You always, after a show, think, oh, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I could have done that. Well, you get that chance when you get to do it again.
And again, and again. I think my most fun role was my smallest role, because you take a look at this face, and it kind of limits the way people perceive me. Well, I can't remember the year now, fairly recently. We did Oliver, and Donna Downey Smith directed, and she gave me the very, very, very tiny part of Old Sally, but she was a bag lady. She was a mean, crotchety old woman. And nobody had ever had enough faith in me to do that, which is what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be another pretty face out there. I wanted to do character roles.
Well, character roles are really the backbone, really, of either theater or film. I mean, you mentioned Jackson Moody, you mentioned Dick Kepley. They were both great character actors, and they made their whole time here doing character roles. And character roles are fun.
Yes, because there's also a variety. I mean, everything else I did was basically musicals, most of them.
You knew John and Rennie Griffith very well.
Very, very well. They were basically friends of the family.
And they were in, well, I don't know how many, countless shows. Some of them together, some of them they weren't in together, but they did countless shows here. What did they bring to the Playhouse?
Professionalism.
Professionalism.
I keep using that same word, but there's no other word for it. And passion. Their last show, I have a couple little tidbits that you might remember, was the Gin Game. They did it together. That was the last show either of them ever did on stage. John, I don't know if this was back in the 60s or the 70s, played Harold Hill in The Music Man. He could have rivaled Robert Preston, and I didn't think that was possible. I mean, they were just, they could have actually gone to Broadway, as could John Abbey.
Right.
There is no doubt those three absolutely could have done it and made it. By the way, did you know that John and Rennie met at the Playhouse?
I wasn't aware of that.
They met here.
Do you remember what show it was? Or what
No, I think, as I remember the story that Rennie told, she was going with a friend, and she was just going to help out backstage, and she and John met. And like most romances, it didn't start off like love at first sight, but then she got more involved in the Playhouse, and he was already involved, and eventually they got married.
Mm-hmm. Well, they were a phenomenal couple, and they weren't just active on stage. They were active in a lot of things around the Playhouse that did not put them on stage.
The Women's Guild for Rennie, and John, even after he had retired, they both had retired, quote unquote, from the Playhouse, he was still painting sets. Mm-hmm. He was doing everything that he could.
Yeah, I never had the opportunity to be in a show with him. I worked with Rennie once on Night Watch in 1973.
Yeah.
And it was a special event, a special occasion.
They were very special people.
They were.
Very close to my heart.
Mm-hmm. Well, you told me the story once. Well, let me back up a little bit. The power of acting, obviously, is very strong. It can influence people. It can bring people to tears. It can make people laugh. But you told me a great story one time about the gingerbread lady that you were in.
Yes.
What was that all about?
That was a show about alcoholism, and it was presented one time only for the benefit of basically the board of the Neil Kennedy Recovery Center in Youngstown. I don't even know if it's still in existence, but they helped alcoholics. And I played the alcoholic mother. Terry Wilkes was in it. It was a small show. And then they had a discussion, and after it all happened, it was over, and the people in the audience were coming around informally, and one woman came up to me and said, "Lynn, you were fantastic. How could you ever do that being an alcoholic?" I'm going, "I'm not an alcoholic. I don't even drink." She said, "Oh my heavens, I'm so sorry. I thought you were an alcoholic."
Wow.
Talk about praise for one's performance.
Yeah. Well, that's convincing portrayal. That's a convincing portrayal. To kind of go to the other end of the spectrum now, you also once told me that your favorite thing to do here, and now we're getting to what I mentioned earlier, your favorite thing to do here is work on the fly reel. Why is that your favorite thing to do?
I think because it was something that I was getting to the point, unfortunately, where I was having some problems remembering my lines. I had had some surgery years ago, and the doctor said eventually that was going to happen, and it was starting. So I thought, oh, what the heck, let's try something different, and if a small part comes up, I can still do it, but I can't do big parts. So I think the first one I ever did, believe it or not, was when you directed me in Christmas Carol.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because The Ghost of Christmas Past is only in the beginning.
Right.
So there I went, brought an extra pair of sweatpants, and stuffed my whole costume into the pants, and climbed up the rail to go up and do it. And I think also the thrill of watching the show every night and watching what happens, but I don't think a woman had ever done it before.
That's very possible. Yeah.
May have assisted, but not run all the flies. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit that the few times I did have somebody up there with me because they thought it was too many scene changes for one person to do it, mm-hmm. I was very upset because I knew I could do it. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed that. It was fun. For instance, I did Chicago, which was one of the very last that I remember really big sellouts we've had here.
Right.
We had a phenomenal cast, and I saw the movie and I hated the show. Well, with the cast we had, I loved the show. Mm-hmm. I loved watching it every night, even though I was on headphones and very busy.
Right.
That's a whole different experience from up there of watching a show.
Oh yeah, it is. A whole different perspective.
Yes, and I just fell in love with doing it.
Okay, I need to take a quick break here. I want to take this opportunity to thank once again Dr. John Cox and We One's Pediatrics down in Canfield for sponsoring this edition of On the Marquee. Promotion of the Playhouse. You've worked in that area before. You sold ads for many years for the Playhouse, which is not an easy job to do.
Actually, it was.
Well, you're a good salesman then.
No, it's because of my background.
Oh, okay.
I worked for WFMJ in sales.
Right.
Which is intangible sales, very intangible, which is very similar to selling an ad in the Playhouse brochure.
Exactly. Well, what does it take to get that level of participation and get that level of promotion going again? Not just with program ads, but just getting promotion out on show. Which is a tough thing to do.
You have to know what is available to you. Now, when I was doing it the year that Bentley came back to help out, the 1 year, I hate to admit I used some of my contacts from WFMJ because I had left them at that point. So it wasn't a conflict of interest.
Right.
That was number one. Number two, I also knew by being in television that there's the availability, even if you just put up a blank sign with the logo and the dates and a voiceover. At that time, they had to do so many public service announcements or PSAs. You just get it ready for them, all the stations will run it. And the papers can occasionally, and you send them press releases to any periodical, whether it's weekly, daily, and flood them. They literally flood them with public service press releases. And if they don't use them, they don't use them. But if they do, that's free publicity.
Sure. Along that same line, back in what again, as I call the glory days, you didn't seem to have any trouble getting promotion for the Playhouse, getting advertising for the Playhouse. That has changed a lot over the years. A lot of times, not just the Playhouse, but local theater in general seems to be at odds with the media. Is there any way that they could get them working closer together to get those ties tighter so that they get better support from the media?
See, I don't think the media is the problem. I think the problem is that in our glory days, and also the time that I worked, because that was my background, and they've never had anybody since then that has a background in sales. I think there are too many. The press just can't, and the press cannot handle, and TVs, all the stuff they get from how many local theaters are there now?
Last count, there was probably upwards of 18, 19, something
Yeah.
like that.
It's hard
It is, yeah.
for the media to give time, and also the government has relaxed their restrictions on PSAs. You used to have to do like 10% of your advertising had to be PSAs, as I've said, public service announcements. They don't enforce it anymore. So that is limited a great deal to the goodwill that you may build up. Because I'm in another organization, I'm on the board of directors, and yes, we had a small budget. And we went radio, TV, we did a lot of things. And some of the media were very, very, very generous with the public service announcements, and some were very stingy. But again, for a theater, when there's 18 or 19 of them competing for the same space in a newspaper or on a television show,
Makes it tough.
it makes it very tough. But if you give the to them, if you have someone come in, and all you have to do is really have a piece of paper with the name of the show, with the logo, the dates, and the number to call, and have voiceover. Come and see the 96th season of the Youngstown Playhouse, starting with. you've lost nothing.
Right.
If they don't play it, they don't play it. But they might play it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And nobody, as far as I am aware, nobody has done that for years. Nobody's made that special effort.
I will say that Guy DeStolfo does the best he can
Oh,
at the
yes.
Vindicator.
No,
I know. He does try to do the best he can with getting as much in as he possibly
Yes, he
can.
does.
And he's restricted, of course, as to what space he's got. There have been a lot of people that have entered and exited the Playhouse stage. Everybody that's been up there has been important to this place and has helped this place grow and become what it is. Some of them have been probably more prominent in promoting the Playhouse and getting the word out just because of the frequency on stage or their maybe their love for and their dedication for it. Now you mentioned John and Rennie Griffith. Does anybody else come to mind that would fall into that same category?
Sis Aller, Vera Friedman, I'm talking the old people. As far as today, I think there are a lot of actors that are very good and very dedicated. The board of directors, we had, well, we now have John Cox, who is very dedicated to keeping this place open. I can't remember the names before.
I know it's tough to remember all the names because the board changes every single.
No, but who? Since we can cut and paste. What was the last one? Rand Becker. We had
Rand was a major. Yeah,
Rand Becker was another one.
Yeah. Well, he came in during that troubled time when actually it was closed for 6 months, and actually got it reopened.
Oh, that's another story I could tell you. The costumes.
Yeah.
Do you remember what happened?
Oh yeah.
In that time?
Yeah. The water.
For those of you who don't, we had a flood, an accidental flood. Somebody didn't do what they were supposed to, and it was well, I think it was over Christmas, and then
It was into January. It was cold.
But
it was cold.
it was one of the coldest winters on history, and there was a big group of us who volunteered to go up to the costume shop and salvage what we could of the costumes, because the costumes were absolutely phenomenal. And literally, there's 2 stories to the costume shop, and the best costumes are on the top. And we just put a long plyboard down the stairs and slid them down, and they were so covered with ice. They just and hit the bottom, and ice went flying all over the place.
We lost a lot of costumes then.
But we saved a lot of costumes.
Yeah.
I mean, there are always stories about the good times, the bad times.
Sure. You were involved with Arts Alive for a number of years.
Yes.
What was that all about, and how did that come about?
That's Sis Soller again. She always came up with ideas, and she had a fantastic relationship with Lou Zona from The Butler. And together they came up with a concept for a fundraiser, and it was a gala. It was back in the era when you still wore tuxes and formal gowns, and I miss those days myself, but I'm old-fashioned, or just plain old. And a beautiful meal and everything else, and I can't remember if they charged $50 or $100, which in the days was a considerable amount,
sure.
but we were sold out all the time. And what it was is between the 2 of them, and I'm sure Sis also had some help, even though she was very knowledgeable with obviously painting, because she was a watercolor artist. Between she and Lou, they came up with a picture that people might want, like Snap the Web. And we would take a picture of it, project it on the back of the stage, and then have celebrities or Playhouse favorites come in this case kids, and reenact Snap the Whip to a song.
Okay.
And we did this for, the show was easily an hour and 15 minutes. Of seeing these great masters in the background, and then someone singing a song or recreating it, which was a lot of fun.
I remember them because they were very successful. They were very, very successful. Of all the people you've worked with here at the Playhouse, and you've worked with many, is there anybody that you didn't get a chance to work with that you wish you had?
On stage, definitely John Abbey, John and Rennie Griffith.
You never worked with John and Rennie?
No.
That's interesting.
Now, John was in The Best Man, so, you know, I was doing backstage, but I mean, I would love to have been on stage with him. John and Rennie, well, that, as I said, there was also a family connection with my parents, so that's how I got to know them, John and Rennie Griffith, so well. I think those are my top three, because I did work with Sis Soller, I did work with Vera Friedman, so I got to, but I was just never in the right place or right time or had the availability to work with them on stage.
Okay. Now, as the Playhouse nears its 100th anniversary, which is happening soon, what do you hope to see it do to get into the next 100 years and continue to be successful?
Be as it was at its 50th anniversary.
And how does it do that?
How does it do that? Everyone has to be totally committed. Whether you're in the front office, whether you're on the board of the directors, whether you're making scenery, working backstage or on stage, or trying to get advertising, everybody has to put 110% in, which is difficult because most people do have jobs.
Right.
But you can do it if you have the dedication. If we have the dedication, we can go on forever. But the problem is, society has changed.
Right.
So in order for this to happen, society's attitudes have to change also. There's where the problem comes in. It's not, I'm not faulting anyone here at the Playhouse because I can't. But you, as they said, you can't get blood from a turnip.
Right.
And until everybody else, you have to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard as you used to turn these people's opinions around, the general public. And we still have the perception we're not safe here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which drives me crazy.
Well, I don't know that that'll ever go away. I mean,
It's always been here.
Yeah, it's always
well, not when it first started, but
right.
Since I've been involved. But we've never had any major,
No, we haven't.
a little thing here and there, but
No,
nothing.
you're going to have that anywhere.
Right.
So, yeah.
You have it at the mall.
Yeah.
So I think it just takes more dedication, more work, looking at more avenues that we haven't tried. It's now the internet. Look into advertising on Facebook or tweeting or whatever. There's so many new avenues to explore to get your word out. And that's what it's going to take, and it's going to take every single person who ever steps through this door.
Right. Have a commitment to this
Yeah.
place. Right.
Not just, oh, I have an hour time to give, that'll be fine, go, you know, I'll be, okay, maybe you have 2 hours, but you just decided to spend an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not talking, again, about anyone, because I can't fault them.
Right.
But do things, talk it up. If you're on the board, come up with new ideas of how to, hey, maybe even get an advertising person. I will be honest, when Bentley hired me the 2 years to do the advertising, he paid me a commission off of every ad I got. Makes a difference.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gives you some incentive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's one small thought.
Okay. Well, I thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Jack. For
Nice
asking
chatting
me.
with you.
Oh,
And,
we're always chatting, but it's nice
Yes.
to
And we'll
do it on the record.
see you in the archive room, hopefully, and dig through some more stuff.
Oh, yes.
I want to thank you for being with us for this edition of On the Marquee, and we will see you the next time. Bye-bye.